First contact. Professor Zalax's bioluminescent spots flickered with agitation as he reviewed the Council's directive for the 100th time. The document's implications threatened centuries of carefully maintained standards at the Galactic Defense Academy. 3 human cadets. They wanted him to accept 3 humans from Sol 3 into the most prestigious military institution in known space. Computer, begin recording. Personal log, date stamp 47,291.3, Zalax's secondary breathing chambers expanded in what his colleagues recognized as extreme distress. The Galactic Council has finally lost what little sanity they possessed. Their latest integration directive isn't merely ill-advised, it's potentially catastrophic. The professor's office on Centaur Prime overlooked the Academy's primary training grounds, where students from 42 different species currently engaged in low-gravity combat exercises. The floating platforms shimmered under the binary suns, each one calibrated to a different gravitational field. It had taken centuries to perfect this training system. They're Death Worlders, he continued, pacing the room's perimeter. Their planet's gravity alone should disqualify them. Not to mention their completely inappropriate responses to stress scenarios. Did you know they produce adrenaline? They actually become more aggressive when threatened. It's barbaric. A soft chime interrupted his recording. Professor, his assistant's melodious thoughts rippled through the room's psychic interface. The human transport has entered our system. They'll dock in approximately 40 standard minutes. Zalax's spots shifted to a deep purple of resignation. Very well. Assemble the welcome committee. And bright mind? Have medical teams standing by. If these humans can even survive our standard gravity, I'll be shocked. The welcoming ceremony was traditionally held in the Grand Hall, a massive chamber designed to accommodate beings of all sizes and atmospheric requirements. Today, however, it felt suffocating despite its enormous dimensions. Hundreds of faculty members lined the crystalline walls, their varied anatomies all oriented toward the main entrance. When the doors finally parted, the silence became absolute. 3 figures stepped through, moving with impossible ease despite the 2.3 standard gravity. The first was tall, even by human standards, with what their species called red hair, a brilliant copper color that seemed to capture and amplify the light from above. Mason Drake, according to the files. His posture spoke of military training, but his eyes held something else. Curiosity. Dangerous curiosity. Behind him came Nova Chen, smaller in stature but moving with a fluid grace that shouldn't have been possible for a species that evolved in less than half their current gravitational field. Her dark eyes missed nothing, cataloging every detail of the chamber and its occupants with unsettling intensity. The third human, Rex Thompson, wore what Zalax would later learn was called a grin, a baring of teeth that somehow didn't indicate aggression in their species. Most disturbing. Welcome to the Galactic Defense Academy, Zalax managed, his translator working overtime to produce the harsh sounds of human English. I am Professor Zalax, Senior Training Director. Thank you for having us, Professor, Drake responded, executing a perfect ceremonial bow, one that acknowledged Zalax's position while maintaining the dignity of his own species. Someone had coached them well. We're honored to be the first humans accepted into your prestigious institution. Yes, well, Zalax's spots flickered briefly to orange, embarrassment. Perhaps we should begin with the orientation briefing. If you'll follow me to the assessment chamber. The assessment chamber was designed to be intimidating. Its walls shifted constantly, displaying real-time calculations in 15 dimensions. The seats were intentionally calibrated to be just slightly uncomfortable for every known species. It was all part of the initial evaluation process. Thompson dropped into one of the seats and immediately sprawled out like he was lounging on a pleasure cruise. So these tests, he said, that unsettling tooth display still on his face, they're basically just advanced versions of human video games, right? Zalax's spots went completely dark. I beg your pardon. Well, looking at these equations, Thomson gestured at the swirling patterns on the wall. They're essentially modeling quantum probability matrices through a visual interface. Like the targeting systems in Stellar Conquest 7, just with more dimensions. The professor's primary heart skipped a beat. This was impossible. The humans couldn't have already developed. You're familiar with quantum probability matrices? Oh sure, Nova Chen joined in, her eyes still tracking the shifting patterns. Most of our advanced gaming systems use simplified versions for their physics engines. Although I have to say, your visualization method is much more elegant than ours. Is that a Heisenberg compensator built into the display itself? Zalax's tertiary brain began to throb. These humans hadn't even achieved unified planetary government yet. They weren't supposed to understand quantum mechanics at this level. They weren't supposed to be able to stand, much less engage in casual conversation about advanced physics. Perhaps, he said carefully, we should begin with a basic assessment of your current knowledge levels. Sounds good to me, Drake nodded. But first, I have a question about your combat training protocols. Those floating platforms out there, they're running on independent gravity fields, right? What's your method for preventing field bleed between platforms? It was at that moment that Professor Zalax, Senior Training Director of the Galactic Defense Academy, with 300 years of experience in evaluating new species, realized he had made a terrible mistake. He had assumed these humans would fail. He was about to discover just how wrong he could be. Breaking the system. Computer, Resume Recording Session 47B, Addendum 12, Professor Zalax's spots pulsed with a mixture of agitation and fascination. It's been 3 standard weeks since the human cadets began their training, and I find myself questioning everything I thought I knew about species development and learning capacity. The professor paused the recording, hovering near the observation window of Training Chamber 7. Below, Mason Drake was attempting what should have been impossible, running a combat simulation designed for 6th-year students. The chamber's gravity fluctuated wildly between 0.1 and 12 standard units, while holographic opponents attacked from multiple dimensions. Resume recording. The humans have completely ignored our carefully structured curriculum. They're not just advancing faster than expected, they're reconstructing our entire understanding of skill acquisition. Take Cadet Drake, for instance. He failed the basic gravity adaptation test 6 times. Through the window, Mason executed a perfect multidimensional combat role, his body somehow anticipating the gravity shifts before they occurred. But he kept failing differently. Each time, he adjusted his approach, tested new theories, gathered data from his failures. On the 7th attempt, he didn't just pass, he broke the course record. When I asked him about his method, he said, and I quote, "I just needed to get a feel for it." Get a feel for it. As if multidimensional gravity manipulation was something one could simply feel. In another part of the facility, Nova Chen was causing an entirely different kind of chaos. The advanced xenobiology labs had never seen anything like her approach to species analysis. Most students took years to master the complex interplay of biological systems across different evolutionary paths. Chen had taken one look at the standard classification system and declared it too rigid. Computer, add personal note, Zalax's spots shifted to a deep blue of professional curiosity. Cadet Chen has developed what she calls a pattern recognition algorithm for xenobiological classification. Instead of following our traditional systematic approach, she's somehow mapping biological systems to musical harmonies. It shouldn't work. It cannot work. Yet her accuracy rate in species identification and biological response prediction is currently at 99.7%. The professor's membranes flickered as he remembered yesterday's incident in the theoretical physics department. Rex Thompson had been found in Lab 23 after hours, surrounded by holographic projections of quantum equations. When security arrived, Thompson was apparently redesigning our quantum probability mapping systems. He claimed our current method was, and again, I quote, too clunky. He had somehow condensed our 15-dimensional calculations into a 3-dimensional visual model that he insisted was more user-friendly. The truly disturbing part. It worked better than our original system. Zalax moved away from the window as Drake completed the combat simulation with a score that shouldn't have been possible for any first-year student, let alone one from a pre-galactic civilization. The humans aren't just learning our systems, they're reinventing them. They approach problems with a reckless disregard for established principles that would be catastrophic if it wasn't so consistently successful. It's as if they don't understand that certain things are supposed to be impossible. A soft chime interrupted his recording. Professor, his assistant's thoughts carried a distinct tone of urgency. There's been an incident in the psychic resistance training facility. Zalax's spots went completely dark. Define incident. 10 minutes later, he stood in the wreckage of what had been the Academy's most advanced psychic training chamber. The room's neural interfaces, designed to withstand the psychic equivalent of a supernova, were smoking slightly. In the center of the destruction, Nova Chen sat cross-legged on the floor, looking perfectly composed while 3 of the Academy's most experienced psychic instructors lay unconscious around her. Would you care to explain? Zalax managed, his translator struggling to maintain a neutral tone. Oh, hey Professor, Chen smiled, apparently oblivious to the chaos surrounding her. We were working on psychic defense techniques, and I had this idea. You know how human brains are supposed to be primitive, because we don't have natural psychic abilities. Well, I figured that might actually be an advantage. Our neural pathways are already really good at creating new connections and patterns, so I thought, what if we treated psychic attacks like a computer virus? Zalax's tertiary brain began to throb again. Like a computer virus? Right. So instead of trying to block the psychic intrusion, I basically created a mental feedback loop. When they tried to access my thoughts, I started thinking about this really catchy song from Earth called Baby Shark. It's designed to get stuck in your head. Turns out, that works on psychic connections too. They couldn't disconnect fast enough, and well. She gestured at the unconscious instructors. I think I accidentally created a psychic earworm. In that moment, Professor Zalax realized they had made an even more fundamental error than underestimating human capability. They had assumed that lacking certain abilities, like natural psychic powers, was a weakness. The humans were showing them that sometimes, what appeared to be a limitation could become an unexpected strength. Computer, update student risk assessment protocols, he said wearily. Add a new category, human improvisation. Priority level, maximum. The next day brought even more surprises. Mason Drake had somehow convinced a group of 4th-year students from 7 different species to join him in what he called parkour practice. They were using the varying gravity fields of the combat platforms to create what appeared to be an extremely dangerous game. It's team building, Drake explained when questioned, as if that justified the sight of prestigious Academy students bouncing between gravity fields like some sort of deranged cosmic ballet. We're learning to predict each other's movements and compensate for different physiologies. Plus, it's fun. Fun. That word kept coming up in human explanations, and it made Zalax deeply uncomfortable. Learning wasn't supposed to be fun. It was supposed to be challenging, rigorous, and properly structured. Yet he couldn't deny the results. The students participating in Drake's parkour sessions were showing marked improvement in their combat scores. Chen's musical approach to xenobiology was being cautiously adopted by other departments. And Thompson's simplified quantum visualizations were revolutionizing the way first-year students grasped multidimensional physics. Computer, personal log addendum, Zalax spoke softly, watching the impromptu gravity games through his office window. I'm beginning to suspect that we haven't just accepted 3 human students into the Academy. We've inadvertently initiated a fundamental transformation of our entire educational system. The humans aren't adapting to our methods, they're forcing our methods to adapt to them. And the truly remarkable thing is, it might actually be an improvement. A sudden crash from below, followed by cheering in 12 different languages, made his spots flicker rapidly. Although, he added, I sincerely hope our insurance policies are up to date. Crisis point. Emergency recording, authorization Zalax Prime 7, the professor's spots pulsed with rapid bursts of red and white, the universal indicator of extreme distress. Time stamp, 47,291.8. The situation has deteriorated significantly. Through the reinforced windows of the Academy's Crisis Command Center, the binary suns of Centaur Prime cast an ominous purple glow across the emergency containment field surrounding Training Complex B. Inside that shimming barrier, something that should have been theoretically impossible was unfolding. For the record, Zalax continued, his translator struggling to maintain clarity through his agitated state, I want it noted that this crisis arose from an unauthorized modification to our quantum probability matrix. Though in fairness to the humans involved, they were technically trying to prevent a different disaster altogether. The events leading to this moment had begun innocently enough. Rex Thompson had been working on further refinements to his simplified quantum visualization system when he noticed an anomaly in the Academy's main power grid. The humans' newly streamlined calculations had revealed a potentially catastrophic flaw in the way the facility handled quantum energy displacement. According to Thompson's calculations, the traditional safety protocols we've used for centuries were actually creating a dangerous resonance pattern in the quantum field. Given enough time, it would have eventually triggered a cascade failure across all our training facilities. In theory, his discovery saved us from a much larger catastrophe. Zalax's spots flickered briefly to orange, the equivalent of a human grimace. Unfortunately, his solution, while brilliant, had one significant oversight. He failed to account for the way human pattern recognition interfaces with quantum probability. On the main display, dozens of monitoring systems tracked the growing anomaly. What had started as a simple power grid modification had somehow linked with Nova Chen's musical xenobiology system and Mason Drake's gravity manipulation techniques. The resulting quantum resonance had taken on characteristics never before observed in known space. The humans call it emergent behavior, Zalax dictated, watching as another containment field snapped into place. The interaction between their three distinct innovations has created something entirely new. The quantum field isn't just fluctuating anymore, it's learning. In the chamber below, swirling patterns of energy had begun forming complex geometric shapes. They pulsed with a rhythm that bore an unsettling resemblance to Chen's xenobiological harmonies. The gravity within the containment zone shifted in ways that somehow felt deliberate. Cadet Drake's latest report suggests the anomaly is attempting to communicate. He bases this on the fact that the gravity fluctuations follow patterns similar to those used in his combat training exercises. Chen agrees, noting that the quantum harmonics match known patterns of sentient neural activity. Thompson. Zalax's spots went completely dark for a moment. Thompson says it's just trying to say hello. The professor's recording was interrupted by a priority alert. The three human cadets had submitted a joint proposal for handling the crisis. Zalax reviewed it with all four of his optical clusters, his spots cycling through colors so rapidly that the monitoring systems issued a medical warning. They're requesting permission to attempt direct interaction with the quantum anomaly. Their theory suggests that since the phenomenon emerged from the combination of their innovations, they might be able to establish meaningful contact. The risk factors are concerning. Through the window, the swirling patterns had begun forming more complex structures. Some of the Academy's quantum physicists swore they could see mathematical proofs writing themselves in the energy patterns. Computer, display casualty projections for proposed human intervention plan. The numbers that appeared made all of Zalax's heart stutter. If the humans failed, the best-case scenario involved the loss of only one training complex. Worst case. The quantum anomaly could achieve cascade consciousness and potentially destabilize the fabric of spacetime itself. Display alternate containment scenarios. The computer complied. Every standard protocol showed a probability of failure above 99.9%. The containment fields would hold for another 47 hours at most. After that, computer, log official response to human intervention proposal, approved. May whatever deities they believe in have mercy on us all. End recording. What followed would later be described in Academy records as either the most brilliant or most reckless operation in the institution's history. The three human cadets approached the quantum anomaly with what their species called confidence, but what most other species would classify as suicidal disregard for reality. Mason Drake took point, using his intuitive understanding of gravity manipulation to establish a stable approach vector. Nova Chen began broadcasting a complex harmonic pattern that seemed to calm the more erratic energy fluctuations. Rex Thompson, meanwhile, had somehow adapted his quantum visualization system into what he called an interface. Beginning attempt at direct communication, Drake's voice came through the command center's speakers with unnerving calm. Nova, give me something in the delta range. Rex, can you clean up that quantum static? Working on it, Thompson's fingers danced across his modified console. There's definitely a pattern here. It's using quantum superposition to try different forms of communication simultaneously. Actually pretty clever. Got it, Chen's voice held excitement rather than fear. The harmonic response is stabilizing. It's learning to match our patterns. I think, yes, it's definitely trying to communicate. Zalax watched in stunned silence as the impossible unfolded before him. The quantum anomaly, rather than continuing its expansion or collapsing into chaos, began organizing itself into increasingly coherent patterns. The humans weren't just containing it, they were teaching it. Computer, resume recording, Zalax managed, his spots now pulsing with a color he'd never displayed before. We are witnessing what appears to be the birth of an entirely new form of consciousness. The humans have somehow midwifed the emergence of a quantum-based entity capable of learning and communication. The implications for our understanding of consciousness, quantum mechanics, and the very nature of reality are. He paused as new data scrolled across his displays. The anomaly had begun transmitting complex mathematical proofs, including solutions to several theoretical problems that had stumped the galaxy's finest minds for centuries. Computer, addendum, the humans appear to have accidentally created an artificial quantum intelligence by breaking approximately 73 of our most fundamental scientific principles. And rather than being properly terrified by this development, they are teaching it jokes. Through the speakers, he could hear Thompson explaining the concept of knock-knock jokes to the quantum entity, while Chen attempted to teach it something called Sweet Caroline. Drake, meanwhile, was discussing the possibilities of using quantum superposition to improve the Academy's training simulations. Final note for today's log, Zalax said wearily, watching as the newly born quantum intelligence began attempting to harmonize with Chen's singing. I believe we may need to completely rewrite our understanding of both possible and impossible. The humans have demonstrated that the gap between these concepts is far more flexible than we ever imagined. Also, I am submitting a request for a substantial increase to our insurance coverage. Galactic Ripples. Official Academy Report, Classification Level Ultra, Security Clearance Omega, Professor Zalax began, his spots displaying the formal pattern required for high-level documentation. Regarding the recent innovations at the Galactic Defense Academy and their implications for galactic security. The professor's office had been relocated to a new quantum-shielded facility, necessary given the frequency with which the newly dubbed Q intelligence liked to drop by for what it called chat sessions. Through his window, he could see the modified training complex B, now serving as both a learning center and interdimensional embassy. The Galactic Council has requested a comprehensive analysis of recent events, particularly concerning the human cadets and their impact on Academy protocols. I find myself in the unprecedented position of having to explain how 3 students from a pre-FTL civilization have fundamentally altered the course of galactic education, military training, and possibly reality itself. A gentle quantum ripple announced the arrival of another message from the Q intelligence. It had developed a fondness for what it called memes after Thomson introduced it to Earth's internet culture. Today's message was a complex quantum equation that, when solved, produced an image of a cat asking, "Can I has quantum cheeseburger?" Computer, note for the record, the Q intelligence continues to display distinctly human influences in its development. While its computational abilities far exceed our most advanced systems, it insists on expressing itself through what the humans call pop culture references. The strategic implications of this are unclear. The real complications had begun 3 days after the Q intelligence emergence. Word of the incident had leaked to other military academies across the galaxy. The resulting chaos made the original quantum anomaly seem straightforward by comparison. The Academy has received 742 official requests for human instructors in the past week alone. The Rigelian War College has offered us their entire antimatter research budget in exchange for consultation rights with Cadet Thompson. The Medusan Tactical Institute wants to implement Cadet Drake's parkour training across their entire curriculum. And the Zenther Science Directory has officially classified Cadet Chen's musical xenobiology system as a controlled scientific revolution. Zalax paused as his assistant transmitted another urgent update. The humans had been busy again. Update to current record, the cadets have now begun what they call cross-pollination of their various innovations. Drake and Chen have developed a method of using xenobiological harmonics to predict and manipulate gravity fields. Thomson has integrated quantum computing principles into combat training simulations. And all three of them, with assistance from the Q intelligence, are working on something they call Project Wonderland, which they assure me is not nearly as disturbing as it sounds. The professor's spots flickered to a deep purple of contemplation as he reviewed the latest training statistics. The Academy's overall performance metrics had improved by 300% since implementing the humans' modifications. More significantly, the dropout rate had fallen to nearly zero. The traditional powers of the galaxy are, to put it mildly, concerned. The ability of 3 human cadets to so dramatically improve upon systems we've used for millennia raises uncomfortable questions about our own technological and cultural stagnation. Some council members have suggested that we may have become too focused on maintaining standards and not enough on advancing them. A commotion outside his office drew his attention. Through the quantum-shielded glass, he could see Nova Chen demonstrating her latest innovation to a group of senior xenobiologists. She had somehow adapted her musical harmonics theory to facilitate direct communication with silicon-based life forms. The crystalline beings floating beside her were vibrating in what appeared to be pleasure. The humans have termed their approach, thinking outside the box, Zalax continued, watching as one of the crystalline entities attempted to reproduce a human melody. The phrase is irritatingly apartment. They consistently refuse to accept the limitations we have taken for granted. More troublingly, they appear to be infectious. He brought up the latest reports from other academy departments. Students from traditionally conservative species were beginning to exhibit decidedly human characteristics in their problem-solving approaches. Even the faculty wasn't immune. Just yesterday, he'd caught one of his most stringent colleagues attempting to teach quantum mechanics through what they called interpretive dance. Computer, add personal observation, we may have inadvertently initiated a cultural revolution. The humans' influence extends far beyond their direct innovations. They have introduced something far more dangerous than new technologies or teaching methods. They have introduced the idea that the impossible is merely a challenge to be overcome. A notification flashed across his display. The Q Intelligence had scheduled another cultural exchange session. Today's topic: Why Human Music Makes Mathematical Sense, a Quantum Perspective on Rock and Roll. The broader implications for galactic society cannot be overstated, Zalax dictated, his spots now showing the complex pattern that indicated deep strategic analysis. We are witnessing the emergence of a new paradigm. Species that have been spacefaring for millennia are being forced to reevaluate their most basic assumptions about education, technology, and the nature of progress itself. Through his window, he could see Mason Drake leading a mixed group of students through what appeared to be an impossible training exercise. They were using the quantum fields to create temporary microuniverses for combat practice, each with its own unique physical laws. The humans call this process disruption, he continued. Another appropriately uncomfortable term. They are not merely participating in our systems, they are fundamentally altering them. And perhaps most disturbingly, they are doing so with a casualness that borders on the absurd. Rex Thompson chose that moment to demonstrate this point by apparently solving a 1,000-year-old quantum paradox while trying to teach the Q intelligence to play something called Pokemon Go. Computer, add final observation for today's record. We thought we were accepting these humans into our academy to teach them. We never considered the possibility that we were the ones who needed teaching. The question now is not whether we can control these changes, but whether we can adapt quickly enough to keep up with them. A sudden burst of quantum activity caught his attention. The Q intelligence had apparently just discovered human dance music and was attempting to recreate a disco using quantum fluctuations in 11 dimensions. Addendum, assuming, of course, that we survive the experience. End recording. New Horizons. Final recording, official graduation ceremony address. Professor Zalax began, his spots displaying a complex pattern that had never been seen before in the Academy's history, a mixture of pride, anxiety, and what humans would call existential awe. Time stamp, 47,293.5. The Grand Hall of the Galactic Defense Academy had been modified significantly since the arrival of the human cadets one standard year ago. Quantum-enhanced holograms danced across the ceiling, showing mathematical equations that transformed into artistic representations of scientific principles. The gravity varied in gentle waves, a graduation gift from the Q intelligence that somehow made every species feel perfectly comfortable regardless of their native gravity preferences. When these 3 human cadets first arrived at our institution, I recorded that it was either the biggest mistake or the most brilliant decision in my career. I now realized that both statements were simultaneously true, a quantum superposition of disaster and triumph that perfectly encapsulates the human approach to, well, everything. The assembled audience represented the most diverse gathering in the Academy's history. Traditional military leaders sat alongside quantum researchers, while diplomatic representatives from hundreds of worlds attempted to process the changes they were witnessing. In one corner, a group of silicon-based beings harmonized with a quantum-projected orchestra, using Nova Chen's xenobiological communication protocols to perform what they called a fusion jazz piece. In one standard year, these humans have not merely completed our curriculum, they have transformed it. The traditional 10-year program has been restructured into what they call an adaptive learning experience. Students now progress at their own pace, using methods that suit their species' natural tendencies rather than forcing conformity to a single standard. Through the quantum-enhanced atmosphere, Zalax could see Mason Drake demonstrating the latest version of his combat training system. The holographic opponents now incorporated probability matrices that allowed them to evolve in response to the students' learning style. More impressively, the system could identify and enhance natural talents that even the students themselves hadn't recognized. The results speak for themselves. Our graduation rate has increased by 500%. More significantly, the quality of our graduates has improved beyond our previous metrics' ability to measure. We have had to develop entirely new standards of excellence, as the old ones proved insufficient to capture the levels of innovation and adaptation we now regularly witness. Rex Thompson's quantum visualization systems have become the standard not just for the Academy, but for scientific institutions across known space. His approach of simplifying complex concepts without losing their essential meaning had revolutionized everything from starship design to planetary terraforming. But perhaps the most significant change has been in our understanding of potential itself. The humans have taught us that limitations are often self-imposed, that the impossible becomes possible when viewed from a different angle, and that progress doesn't always follow a linear path. The Q intelligence chose that moment to demonstrate this principle by transforming the entire hall into a living quantum visualization of the Academy's historical data. The assembled guests found themselves floating through a three-dimensional timeline showing the exponential growth in discoveries and innovations over the past year. The Galactic Council has, after much debate, approved the expansion of our human recruitment program. Next year, we will welcome 20 new human cadets to the Academy. Some of my colleagues have expressed concern about this decision, fearing that more humans might create more incidents. Zalax's spots flickered briefly to what humans would recognize as amusement. In the background, Nova Chen was teaching a group of energy beings how to interpret quantum mechanics through interpretive dance, while the Q intelligence provided a multidimensional light show. These concerns, while understandable, miss the essential lesson we have learned. The humans' greatest contribution has not been their specific innovations, impressive as they are. Rather, it has been their demonstration that progress often requires us to embrace chaos rather than always seeking to control it. The professor paused as his spots shifted to display a formal announcement pattern. Therefore, it gives me great pleasure to present the graduating class of 47,293, including our first human graduates, Mason Drake, Nova Chen, and Rex Thompson. Their official titles, as recorded in the Academy database, are as follows. Mason Drake, Grand Master of Adaptive Combat Systems and Interdimensional Training Protocols. Notable achievement, development of the Dynamic Reality Interface for Variable Environment Training, or DRIVE system, now standard across all Academy facilities. In the audience, Drake was already sketching out ideas for his next innovation, something he called quantum parkour, that made Zalax's tertiary brain throb just thinking about it. Nova Chen, Premier Xenobiological Harmonics Specialist and Interspecies Communication Pioneer. Notable achievement, creation of the universal resonance theory of biological communication, which has reduced interspecies conflicts by 73% through improved understanding. Chen had recently begun exploring the possibility of using her harmonic theories to communicate with exotic matter beings in other dimensions. The Q intelligence was particularly excited about this project. Rex Thompson, Quantum Systems Revolutionary and Reality Interface Designer. Notable achievement, development of the Simplified Quantum Understanding Interface Technology, or SQUINT, which has become the galaxy's standard for quantum visualization and manipulation. Thompson, true to form, was only half paying attention to his own graduation. He was too busy working on a new project that he claimed would allow faster-than-light travel through quantum tunneling shortcuts. But their greatest achievement, Zalax continued, his spots now showing a pattern that indicated deep personal meaning, has been teaching us that the greatest barrier to progress is often our own certainty about what is and isn't possible. They have shown us that education isn't just about transferring knowledge, it's about fostering the creativity and courage to question everything we think we know. The Q intelligence manifested a series of quantum fireworks that spelled out "congratulations" in every known language simultaneously, including 3 that hadn't been invented yet. And so, as we welcome these graduates into the ranks of the galaxy's defenders, we also welcome a new era in our own development. The humans have a saying, the only constant is change. We now understand that this isn't just an observation, it's a challenge. A challenge to never stop questioning, never stop exploring, and never accept that anything is truly impossible. Computer, final note for the official record, the experiment of accepting human cadets into the Galactic Defense Academy has been, by any meaningful measure, an unprecedented success. Though I suspect unprecedented is a word we will need to get used to using. End recording. As the ceremony concluded, Zalax watched his first human graduates already deep in discussion about their next projects. Drake was explaining something about quantum consciousness transfer to a group of mystified senior officers. Chen had somehow convinced the silicon beings to attempt a quantum-harmonized version of something called Bohemian Rhapsody. And Thompson was sketching out equations for what he claimed would be a small modification to the structure of spacetime itself. The professor's spots displayed a new pattern, one that would eventually be classified in xenobiological databases as human-induced optimistic terror. The galaxy would never be the same after this. And perhaps that was exactly what it needed. The end.